We're trying to see what kind of reason we can put on all of this, because again, the school of thought that the privatization plan is quite good. They are still very much out there, and they still insist that privatization is one of the best ways for us to move as a nation. But again, be that as it may, would you want to let us in on why you think it all failed? Is it as a result of the frequency with which we changed the director generals of this bureau, or is it some kind of mismanagement in the hands of those who actually carried out all the bids?
Yeah, I agree with you in total that the best way is privatization. Privatization untangles government from day-to-day running of parastatals that they have no business doing. But what I've noticed so far, even from the proceedings we have seen and from what I can glean from even staff of the BPE, I'm close to a couple of them in the BPE, is that they too are hemmed in there.
How?
We heard from some DGs when they came on the floor of the Senate who said that they were getting memos, getting pressure from somewhere. But this is an organization that are supposed to be independent. People are supposed to bid, and the bid is supposed to be open and transparent, because one of the things that BPE trusts as its value, and many of them, is integrity, openness, transparency. So this integrity, openness, and transparency ought to rub off on the transactions. But we discovered that, look at what happened in insurance. Somebody came and there was dropping one man's name.
Yeah, but
when you have incidents like that, the DG himself will be reading the body language of the person that appointed him or her. And that is why we are where we are today. That these things are sold off. The feature of the privatization is that companies are sold off at lower than their true value. And then the transactions are not open. People go to bid, and before you know it, they announce one as the winner. The other parties don't know the undercurrents.
Mr. Ugbechie, sorry, I'm afraid I have to pull on your not on your experience again. When you were at Daily Times, when was Daily Times privatized? Do you have an idea?
Oh, that's 2005, 2004, 2005.
2004, 2005. Yeah. When did you join?
I was editor in 2007.
2010, so that's like 2 years after.
Yep.
When possibly the firm, assuming that there were equipment that were bad and had to be replaced, a firm definitely would have been able to do that, because a host of people are saying that these firms, like you have said that now, were undervalued.
Yeah.
But some other people are saying that equipment that have not been used over time, they lose their value, and sometimes you can't use them anymore. So if Daily Times wasn't working for a while, maybe for like 2 years or 3 years or how many years before it was finally privatized, and then the period which the new owners would take it over and refurbish it to make it, all of that would also add to the expenses, so to speak. Yeah. So before you now, come in, I was just wondering, if truly, do you really believe that these firms were undervalued, considering that at some point, even the people who bought them over could not meet up? They could not meet up their financial obligations to the BPE and even to their members of staff.
Clearly undervalued. If I even use the case of Daily Times as a case in point, you don't sell Daily Times for 1.2 billion or 1.25 billion naira.
But why would you say so?
Why wouldn't I say so? This is the only media empire in this country that has assets in all parts of the country, assets offshore. So even looking at the assets, forget about the printing press. Yes, the press was bad, very more down. It's a web offset that was even erected decades back. But beyond the web offset machine that was moribund, but don't also forget that as at the time it was privatized, they were publishing. Hakim Bello is alive. He was the editor the last editor pre-publication privatization. So, and after the privatization, you could still publish. You don't need a press to publish a newspaper. I'm just using it as an instance. But what I'm saying is that it cuts across all the firms privatized, that some of these firms, and most of them, if not some of them, were undervalued. Daily Times, for instance, is worth more than 1.25.
I have to come in again, because what Umar is saying is that we tend to look at the wear and tear, for instance, so to speak, the depreciation that some of these companies or some kind of stop you finding such companies. If Daily Times, for instance, before privatization, had actually cost maybe, for instance, 10 billion naira, you don't expect it to still be in that region of 10 billion naira. And again, some are already saying that, in a climate like Nigeria, when some people bloat contracts, in actual fact, maybe when they say 10 billion naira, the actual worth of that particular Daily Times was actually maybe 2 billion naira.
Yep.
So if it's 2 billion naira, and now they're getting to go to the real value, which is worth at that time, then if you say 1.25 billion naira for Daily Times, then it's not a far cry from the actual amount.
It is, to me, it's a far cry. I mean, it's clearly a far cry. I mean, this is an organization that I know so well.
Okay.
And this is an industry that I think I can say, I can blow my trumpet, that I know it inside out. That of Daily Times, let us even use that of Daily Times, is over, well below the actual value.
Let's add, to what Sulaiman said, let's add this to it, that you're an investor, you're going to come into that company, you're going to spend a lot of money for all the numerous assets the Daily Times has.
Yeah.
The company that's coming to take it over or, buy it off is going to have to refurbish every single one of these things to get them to work at optimal value, because this time around, he's in business to make money. So he's definitely not buying the assets to just leave them there and stare at them and say, oh, at some point I possibly might be able to sell them.
Yeah.
And even if he does, he's within his right after all. He's bought them up, because one of the things that they're accusing people who bought these things off for was that they were looting. I don't know how you can be the owner.
Okay, I understand where you're going.
Yeah.
You see, let me tell you something. Why did government have to wake up one day to set up the NCP, National Council of Privatization, and then you have the PPE, the Bureau? It is to make these companies. Government was saying, look, we have to create jobs. We have to stimulate the economy. And most of these companies are taking more funds from government coffers in the name of subsidy. And government cannot continue to throw money into these organizations. The same government are saying we want to create jobs. So they privatize to private persons, professionals with capacity to do that business. Because that is one of the key reasons. When you talk of core investor, you must have the technical capacity to do that business. So the essence of privatization is to make that company profitable. It's not for you to access strip.
Yeah,
we must know this at the back of our mind.
The intention is clear. I mean, we all know what the proper procedure should be. We've seen governments come and go. Governments come, lie to Nigerians, they come, they go. Time and again. I mean, look at this scenario, for instance. Now, it's bigger than just the ad hoc committee taking a look at what went wrong. It looks like an institutionalized problem, a challenge that we've got in our hands. Because, I mean, it comes right from the top, influencing people to do what they were supposed to do. Who was supposed to have blown the whistle? How could they have blown the whistle? Who was supposed to have acted? Shouldn't people be on their way to behind bars, for instance, or something? What happens after this process? So how do we begin to even pick up the pieces and move on from this scenario?
Going forward, actually, because what we have seen now is not, to me, it's just a feeling of deja vu. We have seen it before. We have seen it proved before.
Are we supposed to fold our hands and watch it because we've seen it before?
That's why we are discussing it. And I'm saying that those guilty, because this should not end on the floor of the Senate. I'm happy that the EFCC said they are watching and they will step in. Because at the end of the day, it's all economic crime. And we have agencies to deal with these issues of economic crime. So I expect these agencies to pick up these persons that have been, including the people making the accusations. Let them come behind closed doors and then let them tender all their documents, all the memos, whether it's verbal or not. You have to say it, how it was given to you, because nobody, if you CNC gives you a verbal directive, I mean, you must be smart enough to ask that this thing be put documented. And for your own self-esteem. No, for your own defense.
Good.
Yes, in the civil service, people are smarter these days. I've had a stint in the civil service. I was the immediate advisor to the former state president. Sometimes when they give you such directives, also insist, either through a minister or anybody in the presidency, that this thing be put on paper. Because you're also looking at if you really have integrity to protect. But if you have come there with a business as usual mindset, you won't be looking at such documentation.